Welcome back, WNST, Towson, Baltimore, and WNST.net. We are at the Georgia World Congress. All of our WNST coverage brought to you by our friends at LifeBridge Health Sports Medicine Institute. And, of course, many, many other sponsors we'll be talking about all week long. Chris Pika is here. Luke Jones is here as well. Chris is yelling at me because my credentials not going to be online because I'm going to be out of the shot. So I'm trying to make the shot better for you guys. So I
you
feel
brought
like
me on camera.
I feel like
then.
Vanna.
Yes,
I feel
exactly,
like
yeah.
yes. Like,
Nobody needs to see this ugly face.
Like that. The ugly face. Anything we could do to block Tom Brady? Out of the shot.
Yeah, we're better. We're better.
Luke Jones against Jared Goff.
Yeah.
That wouldn't be pretty.
All right, so we're here,
football.
and it's obviously a whole lot more fun when our team's here. And I look up and I see all the covers of the Super Bowl magazines, and our Ravens Super Bowl 35, 47 up on the wall. Every year we come and it's Tom Brady. Where are the Ravens in all of this, right? Because you were with John Harbaugh on Friday. They had a press conference. We're going to hear from Eric DeCosta on Wednesday. We're not going to be there. Not sure if we're going to hear from Steve Bisciotti or not here at this point. Fixing your microphone. It's good. We'll be doing it all on camera here now. It's
all right.
We're practicing for the real week. No, we're really doing it. Thoughts about where the Ravens are in this progression as to whether they're moving toward or away. And a lot of that for me, when I start to think about Yanda and Weddle and Suggs and where they are and Flacco not being here, I don't want to say it's reboot or rebuild, but it certainly doesn't feel like a lot of these guys are going to be back. And I think there's going to be more turnover than maybe more fans are thinking there's going to be. I think fans may be a little more shocked because they're always shocked anytime anybody leaves. It's always that way. But I think it's going to be fast and furious in this offseason. That's my belief.
Well, I mean, when automatically you have a new general manager, you have a new offensive coordinator. Oh, yeah, you have a new franchise quarterback, or at least the guy you hope is going to be your franchise quarterback over the next however many years. So it is going to feel different. And I think what made this year so unique, and we talked about this really from the night that they drafted Lamar Jackson all the way through the end of the season, is you have a new quarterback. So very clearly that's the most emphatic statement you can make, that you are pivoting in a new direction. Yet the biggest reason still in my mind, and I mean this with no disrespect to Lamar Jackson or the running game, is they had a really, really, really good defense this year, but there are so many veteran players on that defense where you ask the question, for every Marlon Humphrey who is ascending, you have a couple guys who are Terrell Suggs, Eric Weddle, Jimmy Smith,
close to the end.
Brandon Carr. Yep. You go down the list and you just ask, are you going to get better next year from any of those guys? Are you going to get the same from those guys next year?
Do you get to 12 or 13 wins with those guys?
And that's
where, can you get to 10?
And that's where part of me wonders if now is actually the time to be a little bit more bold, alluding to what you were saying, that maybe you do make a few more changes, not with the thought that you're completely starting over.
Well, hold on. The leash has got to be long here. They just gave John 4 years. Eric's been on the job 10 minutes. Literally, they have just married a coach and an administration together for an entire term that starts essentially, if I'm Steve and I'm standing in front of us, I say it essentially starts now all over again with a little bit of a head start and some training wheels on a quarterback. And we're going to start judging from here forward because that's really where they are. And I don't think you can look at them right now and say they're better than an 8-8 football team next year, or that you would look at them as that, because the pieces, this is going to be a lot of turnover. I don't see them doing the status quo thing. They didn't stay status quo on Joe Flacco. I don't see him staying status quo on Suggs, Yanda, any of this stuff. Or even C.J. Mosley, to give him all the money to say we're really going to be that kind of a team.
Yeah, I think what's tough is it's more so on the defensive side of the ball. I mean, offensively, they need to improve their offensive line. They're going to be making changes at wide receiver again, which is an annual thing here in Baltimore, and we get that. But it really, for me, it is, to what lengths do you go to try to keep this defense together? It's one thing to talk about Terrell Suggs. If he's back, you're probably looking at a one-year deal, something that's not going to be prohibitive on your salary cap. Eric Weddle, I think, based on the fact that he backtracked a little bit from his original remarks at the end of the year about it's the Ravens or I'm going to retire. Well, at the Pro Bowl this past week, he said, well, maybe I will play elsewhere.
To me, if the Dolphins want to give him 2 years at $8 million, he's not going to get that now, though. I don't think.
But to me, that's a tell that. And he even talked at locker cleanout day. He was going to speak with Eric DaCosta. That's a tell that the organization is saying, well, Eric, we'd like to have you back, but probably at a reduced salary from where he is right now. And that's fair. I think as much as he was, you can talk about him being a Pro Bowl safety, he didn't make very many plays this year. What he brings is much more on the mental side. So you talk about those two, but for me, the most compelling one, and this is really where I think it's going to be fascinating to see how all in they truly are in building a great offense around Lamar Jackson, or is it going to be defense first, as it has been throughout Joe Flacco's run, especially post-Super Bowl 47. Guys like me have complained about that year after year after year. I think C.J. Mosley's the fascinating one. I think C.J. Mosley's a heck of a football player. However, you look at where he lines up in comparison to Luke Kuechly, in comparison to Bobby Wagner. Yeah. Both of those individuals, I think Kuechly, off the top of my head, average annual value somewhere 12, I think, somewhere in that neighborhood. Bobby Wagner's a little less than that.
And the value of that position's changed a lot since Ray Lewis's era to some degree.
But you look at their numbers, they're not really applicable because their deal was signed 4 years ago.
Right.
So is C.J. Mosley, do you view him as a $14, $15 million a year player? Because that might be what his market is. And we know it's not always about who's best. It's who's up to get paid next and what those needs are in the market as far as what teams are looking for that. So my question is, I love the player. I'd love to see C.J. Mosley back with the Ravens, and I think he brings a lot of qualities that, for everyone complaining about him in pass coverage or that he's not Ray Lewis, I think there are intangibles that he brings in addition to his play. What is that worth? Because I think we talked about this same exact issue with Brandon Williams 2 years ago, and in my humble opinion, I don't think that's necessarily added up as far as what they've paid and what they've gotten in return. So do you make a difficult decision there, understanding your defense is going to take a step back? Doesn't mean it's going to be awful, but it's going to take a step back. But we're going to use those resources to build the best possible offense we can around Lamar Jackson, and that's really what this league has become.
Right.
The 4 conference championship, or the participants, top 4 offenses in the league. I don't think that's an accident anymore.
No, it's not. I mean, defense still does win championships. Sure. You still have to have those things, but in a league with a lot of offensive innovation, and you see Sean McVay leading that charge, Sean Payton, everything he did with Drew Brees, leading that charge. What's interesting to me is where Eric DaCosta, obviously learning and working with Ozzie day in and day out, but you come into that job and you're not asked to be Ozzie Newsome. You're asked to be Eric DaCosta with whatever you want to bring to it.
I want him to have new ideas. I don't want him to be an Ozzie clone. Right.
You don't want that to be a clone, and so you want him to be able to come in with some things. What does he want to do differently? What is he seeing in the league going forward? Mm-hmm. We always would talk about the Patriots. The one thing the Patriots always did right in a lot of respects was they let go guys almost a year early. There was no sentimentality about certain players.
Years. I mean, like guys that were still really good.
Ozzie had a little bit of a reputation for that as well, cutting a guy a year too early rather than a year too late.
Right.
I mean, the Ravens have not had a lot of that. I mean, they've hurt a lot of feelings. Ed Reed, Todd Heap, a lot of guys. Kelly Gregg, there were a bunch of guys that there was a lot of sentimentality. Jared Johnson, they said, we don't have the money for you. That was another part of this. The Ravens have never, because of so many Hall of Fame players and guys playing at top of school, they've never really had we just have lots of cap room. I remember hearing the Browns and the Raiders having $40, $50, $60 million of cap room. You laugh a little bit, but the cap has grown so much now that when we talk about Mosley like this, if he's a player you want, you just sort of soak it up, suck it up, and say, we'll be adding another $11 million to the cap in a couple of, we'll have that number in 20 or 21, and we'll also have a player that, and here's where, is he ascending? I don't know. That's going to be the question. That's always the question. We talked baseball earlier. Is this an ascending player? Aaron Donald, still ascending, right? I don't know if C.J. Mosley's considered to be that guy or not, Chris.
Well, and you look at it, too. You're talking about a league now that has made more than a subtle shift to very, very young players, okay? The veteran players, once you get to a certain point, teams look at that cap number a lot harder, and they're going, you know what? We got a group of guys that are coming out of college. We could do just as well with this group. And they're more concerned with the guys that are 22, 23, 24, 25, right. 26. You know, hey, we get to a guy to 29, 30. If the money isn't there, where in the past some teams may have gone ahead and given that big deal, I think a lot of teams are more apt to walk away from a player at 30, 31 on that next big deal going, right. We're not going to be the team to do it.
Because, well, there is no sentimentality.
Right, because we see the guy that's 22 or 23. The running back position is a perfect example of it. The running back position, guys could play into their early 30s. Now it's like you get to 26, 27, you're already looking for the next guy that's behind them, and it's happened that way, the way the salary cap structure and the veteran payment structure is. Now you know teams are constantly getting a lot younger than they have been, and I think that's been a change.
For me, and you mentioned running back, that's where I keep coming back to is positional value.
Right.
What are truly the most valuable positions, and that's where I do struggle. The Ravens, they haven't hid from this. They've always talked about wanting to be very strong up the middle, and naturally that makes sense when you have a Ray Lewis, a Hall of Famer, right. Ed Reed, who's going to go into the Hall of Fame. You had Haloti Ngata for years. You had Sam Adams and Tony Siragusa. So I understand being strong up the middle, but I look at this in this day and age more and more, and I think defense is still important. I'm not saying it's not, but I think more so than trying to build just a defense to lead your team to a championship, I think it's much more offense, and then can you get those splash kind of plays, forcing turnovers, quarterback sacks, edge rushers, corners, guys like that. I'm sorry, I'm more willing to invest in those spots more so than an inside linebacker, unless he is an unbelievable
right.
cover guy.
Right.
And there aren't many of those. That you might be able to count on two hands and have fingers left over as far as the quality normal linebackers that can cover. Defensive tackle, you know, I probably wouldn't have given Brandon Williams that deal 2 years ago because I'm not sure you're getting the bang for your buck there. Understanding you can't pay everyone,
right.
and you are going to have to make tough decisions.
We are in a jet sweep world.
Yeah.
Now, we're in an RPO jet sweep world. I hate using all those terms, but it is the truth. It's now speed. You know, Randy Mueller, old general manager in New Orleans, would always say, the one thing you can't teach is speed. And now it's, you know, remember Ray Lewis used to be able to get to the edges early in his career at the middle linebacker spot. He was very fast to get the guys that were trying to come around the edge. Mm-hmm. Now, where you've got a guy that's a little bit more of a plotter at the linebacker position that maybe doesn't have that speed, that positional value comes into play because now you're running guys all over the place, off the edges, up the field, and you've got to be able to cover them.
So we're seeing safeties play linebacker more often.
That's exactly right, because they've got to pick these guys up at the line of scrimmage and run step for step.
Well, it also speaks to how many plays we're running, and I think in Baltimore this year we saw this on our offense to keep the defense off the field. How many plays is your rush edge going to play, even though you're paying him $16, $18 million? You know, where is that value play by play? And you're not paying 11 guys anymore. You have 16 starters on defense, right? By the time you go, you know, who think of themselves as I play a lot. I play 30, 40, 50 snaps a game. If you're out on defense 90 snaps a game, almost nobody's – I mean, Gronkowski played 87, whatever that crazy number was a couple weeks ago, right? But in general, you pay all this money and you say, is that guy an 80-snap guy or is that guy a 40-snap guy? And I'm sure there's analytics to all of that as to what the value is there. But I think when there's even an inclination that I need another safety on the field, not because, CJ, you're not good at this, but because of the way they play.
Right.
Because of what the jet sweep does, because of and I think we saw that for sure with what the Chargers did when they came in and said, you know what, you might be our best football player, you might be our best down lineman, you might be our best inside linebacker, but right now I don't need a fork, I need a knife. You know, I need a safety, I need a different body out there.
You're running 8 guys to stop what the Ravens were trying to do, and they made that adjustment because they had the skill players at those positions to make it work. And a lot of teams don't have that flexibility. The flexibility the Ravens showed offensively in putting a new quarterback in during the bye and changing up how they played offense to basically go to a modified single wing to do some of the stuff that they were able to do with Lamar and Gus. Okay, you have to be that nimble. You've got players that are more plotters and dinosaurs running around out there than guys that are speed guys, and that's the way this game has evolved in recent years. The biggest guys aren't always going to get all the money. Your safeties, your outside guys that can chase down a receiver, chase down a running back, those are the guys that are going to get paid now.
You need multiple players. I mean,
yes.
Multiple skills, or, in the case of the Ravens, you look at how they handled the linebacker position. Now, CJ was on the field every play, and that's, maybe that's the argument that you do need to go above and beyond to keep him. But we saw Patrick Owasso, but him, Kenny Young, Anthony Levine playing in the dime. I mean, they really Chuck Clark a little bit here and there. They'd slide Jefferson into the box from time to time. It really was a multi-pronged approach.
Well, then you say, well, how valuable is any one guy in any circumstance? Much like we're seeing with these baseball players now, where you're like, well, is any guy a $30 million? No, because there's a lot of things I can do resource-wise unless he's really crazy special, and that's where you have to ask, do I want to pay a guy in that spot to be front of school? And maybe in the case of Weddle or Mosley, it's about, he can wear the helmet, and he's going to be a leader out there, and he's going to show up. And I'm willing to pay more for that. And the Ravens have always – we talked about human intelligence and valuing, all of the emotional intelligence and all that on the baseball side. CJ would qualify as a check-the-box guy if I want him on my team, right? And so would Brandon Williams. So I think to some degree you look at it that way, where the Steelers are out peddling Antonio Brown because they can't live with him, even though you want him on your team, right?
Yeah, I mean, I guess for me, coming back to Mosley, just to give this, this is...
Well, we're having a great conversation about him and his value. Well, I would check the box to say, for all the reasons, there's a lot of football reasons to say, all right, we don't want to do that or we don't want to give him that. But I think there's a lot of other building things to say, maybe we won't. He is the guy we want to pay a little. Remember, we talked about Nick Markakis down here in Atlanta, right?
Yep.
Where the Orioles didn't want to pay him that money, but the Braves were happy to pay him.
Yep.
And he was happy to go sign in a bad play, in a place where he wasn't going to win. Right. I think there's a season and a stroke for everything. I think Mosley's I don't say the Ravens have to keep him, but I would have no problem if they keep him and pay him a little too much in this environment, because I think there's going to be enough ripping apart of the team that he might be a little bit closer to the aorta that they might want to keep.
Yeah. The only thing I'll say is
my speech
they're strong up the middle. Brandon Williams, C.J. Mosley, Tony Jefferson, and let's say Weddle moves on. What are you doing about edge rusher? I mean, having a pass rush in this league is of the utmost importance.
Well, they keep trying to draft for that. And to your point, the Williamses and the Bowsers.
And look, I'm not even saying that necessarily that means you earmark that money that goes to Mosley for signing a pass rusher. And, does it come down to – so I don't know. And I'm going to keep flipping this around to the other side of the ball. Don't make the same mistake with Lamar Jackson that you did with Joe Flacco over the last 5 to 6 years, where you continuously asked him to do less with more than even talking about the high-paid quarter. I mean, it's just, you asked him to do – right, you asked him to do more with less than just about anyone in the league. That's what I meant to say. But I just don't want to see this become, just because they had some success this past year, and say, okay, we're going to continue to do this with defense, and we think Lamar can do more with less. I don't think that is a good formula, and I don't think he's going to be able to reach his full potential unless you go out there and finally figure out wide receiver.
Right.
Get some stronger interior offensive line.
And this is where, in my background, for those who don't know, I travel with ESPN every weekend. I'm at a college game every Saturday, sometimes twice a week. The concepts of college football in the last 5 years have now finally filtered to the NFL.
Because the players fit the suit. Johnny Bravo.
Right. The college guys are playing spread offenses. The defensive guys are running to the edges. They're going crazy. You see the jet sweeps. You saw all this stuff that the colleges were doing and how many points they were putting on the board. There's a lot of talented players out there.
Sometimes it looks like the magnet game. Remember the
magnet? Yes.
It looks a little bit like that.
NFL electric football.
We're gonna call it that for moving over.
Yeah,
magnet football.
A little electric football. But these kids are used to playing in those roles where now the NFL was behind. Now the NFL is playing in those roles where you're going, wow, this guy's a fit here, and we've got a guy coming out of college or maybe a first-year guy that's got that background, that kid from Alabama that's got crazy speed at linebacker, or crazy speed at safety, or a wide receiver that can do different things and be wide open because he's used to running 60 times a game downfield because that's the way we want him to go. And whereas maybe guys are a little bit more in traditional roles. So I think that's the other part of getting younger and making those decisions, saying, hey, do we commit this kind of money, or we got a guy coming out in the draft that might be a year away, and how do you balance that? And that's where I'm interested in seeing what Eric wants to do, what his ideas are as far as how he values players and how he values positions and how he values the cap, because you don't want to tie up the cap with Flacco's, what they did with Flacco, which was a great deal at the time it was signed. Because we were saying,
well, they're a completely different team now, right? With this quarterback, with this system,
but remember all the complaints about the money,
same coach,
right? But they're talking about the money they were giving Flacco at the time. People were going crazy. I'm like, do you understand that that's going to be a bargain once the next set of deals come through? Flacco's deal is going to look like a bargain, even though percentage against the cap it doesn't.
Right.
The money did, and so you always have to make those types of decisions. But I want to see what Eric DeCosta values that's different from Ozzie Newsome, and have they learned from their, I wouldn't say mistakes, but have they learned from what kind of adjustments they have to make? What have they learned here in the last 3 or 4 years that will help them with a new quarterback who may not be Mr. Right, but he's certainly Mr. Right now for a few seasons.
And they'll have the financial flexibility that they haven't had. But again, it wasn't just and I'm not saying you were suggesting that, because you even said that the contract over time, he was making a lot of money, but other quarterbacks were getting paid too, and guys that were less accomplished than him. But at some point in time, you look at where they invested their draft capital. You looked at the free agent dollars that they did have that they gave to a Brandon Williams, a Tony Jefferson. We're not talking about premium positions there. We're talking about a run-stopping nose tackle, a box safety. Compared to every year, what were we talking about this time of year? Needing to improve the offense, needing a wide receiver, needing to beef up the offensive line. You lose Kelechi Osemele or Rick Wagner. Okay, you need to replace them, but it just felt like that standard kept dissipating while defense, that remained in vogue.
That's going downhill while the league's scoring averages are doing this going the other way.
And I think this year they finally got over the hump as far as the defense. They finished, and they came up big in those big situations, whereas they hadn't been doing that, even though their statistics look good. You can think of 4th and 12. You can think of Pittsburgh on Christmas Day. But I felt like the resources invested the last 3 or 4 years on the defense, it didn't bring that return. And in the meantime, you had a quarterback who I think you wasted some close to prime years that probably could have been more successful.
I was going to jump in, and you said the guys that weren't as accomplished as him. I don't know how much money Matt Stafford has made, but I'm thinking it's more than Joe. I don't know how much money your guy Matt Ryan down here has made.
And by the way, they always had wide receivers for Matt Stafford, too.
I bet it's more than Joe. I bet if you look up Sam Bradford, how much money Sam Bradford's made, versus how much money.
The golden example there.
Yes. But my point is, right? I mean, guys who've won versus guys who haven't won. For people to get caught up in Flacco's money, like that's just never been part of my against the cap. I'll hear
that's what I mean. It's more of against what the percentage of cap he's
against
taking up.
What it means to not having the right wide receiver and the amount of pressure it puts on you that Brashad Perryman has to work out when you draft him. When you draft these guys, it needs to absolutely work. And, I mean, Joe even admitted to you and I, Luke, at one point early in the year, we got into a conversation in the corner with him after a game about Ray Rice and relative value and how things changed after Ray Rice, how the running game needed to be different. And I think they really focused. I mean, they had a running game coordinator who's now the offense coordinator, by the way. Before they had a running quarterback, they had Greg Roman. And the style they're choosing to go here now, and you were here for Michael Vick, it has never, ever worked at the pro game to the point where one of the guys is up on the wall here winning. And I think when you start talking about it from just where the evolution of football is to say, can we keep a quarterback healthy running into linebackers that look like C.J. Mosley or worse, Aaron Donald or J.J. Watt, running the contact 12 to 18 times a game, I still will argue that that's going to be the day we see it work. will be such good fortune in this game to not get a quarterback hurt in playing this style of football.
You almost had it in Cam Newton in that Super Bowl. That was probably the closest you had to a guy. But of course, Cam Newton's
he's a very accomplished pocket
and he's
passer
also
though, too.
right. Yes,
right. And that's where Lamar has to improve. I mean,
I think that's I think everybody
even
knows
if he doesn't get hurt, that is going to have to evolve.
I don't even think of Cam Newton as a running quarterback. So, I mean, I really don't. I think of him as, even when I think of that year, I think of him as a guy who throws the ball as well as these guys on the wall throw the ball. I mean, he's been on the wall, and I don't put him in that box. I don't think of him as having that kind of an offense, even though I sat out there for a week and we talked about it. And he didn't have – talk about a guy that didn't have – go back and look at the skill position players he had getting to a Super Bowl. I mean, he made chicken salad.
And here's the difference. You look at a 4-5 Ravens team that makes the change during the bye because of injury. Okay, let's say Flacco isn't hurt. The defense is playing at that level that they played down the stretch, and Flacco's your quarterback with the offense they had and the wide receivers. You'd make a case that they probably aren't making the playoffs.
Yeah,
I mean, because
it was,
they might have been 8-8, 9-7. Would have been.
Lamar's got a special skill set. There's nobody that's going to say he doesn't. Now, whether it's sustainable or long term, or whether you can come win this football game, in this division and in the way the game is played with this style, it's something a lot. Most of the geniuses in the NFL said no, thank you. Give me one of these guys.
Right.
Give me that guy that looks and smells like Joe Flacco or Jameis Wade, whoever it is. I want a 6'6" guy that stands in the pocket and delivers the football, because that's our best chance to get here, not our best chance to make the next first down, which is going to be give me a guy that's fast as hell.
It comes down to this.
And we saw that for 8 weeks this year.
And you guys know I'm very much a data analytics, new wave of thinking kind of person. I don't hide from that. More and more, I mean, these teams aren't throwing on first down and throwing 50 times a game just for the heck of it.
Right.
The data shows that you're more efficient, more explosive. I mean, think about it. Even the most mediocre of quarterbacks that average, 6.5 yards per attempt? That's really mediocre.
Yeah.
Well, that's still a heck of a lot better than the best running game averaging 5.2 yards per attempt. So, you just do the math, and that's where even putting the injury piece aside with Lamar Jackson, they're going to have to throw the ball more, because as much as you can point to the time of possession, keep in mind it was also a heck of a defense on the other side of the ball that they that was benefiting from that formula. And you look at, they weren't very efficient in the red zone. The last couple weeks of the season, they were bad on third down, even though they had been good on third down up until that point. They weren't scoring a ton of points. It was all very complimentary, and it fit. And also their special teams played better the second half of the season. But I think because of what we were talking about with the defense, some of the difficult decisions they're going to have to make with the veterans, and whether they're going to bring back a Weddle, a Suggs, Mosley being the major piece there. But you're going to have to evolve as an offense, and you're going to have to throw the ball more.
Right.
I've said over and over, the solution here isn't that Lamar Jackson has to become a top 10 passer. Can he get into the average territory for an average passing NFL starting quarterback with what he brings with his legs that are special? And he should never apologize for that. And the Ravens shouldn't apologize for utilizing that, even if they need to maybe not have it be 18 carries a game.
Back
You have to be multi-dimensional in this league, and that's the one thing. You can't have Lamar Jackson do what he do without a strong run game.
Right.
But you also have to have complementary receivers, and he is going to have to grow into a better percentage passer. Mm-hmm. And obviously, the one we'll all talk about is hanging on to the football.
Sure.
Because the one thing the Ravens were able to do, which they couldn't do in the playoff game against the Chargers, they play incredibly well with the lead. Once they get ahead, they have the ways of killing the clock. They have the ways of doing long drives. Your defense gets out there and does their job. It was a lot different story when they're trailing the Chargers and you're asking Lamar to throw the football around because they don't have a choice. That's a big difference between A and B, and the Ravens need to be on that A side a heck of a lot more, and they need to be on the B side to be successful in 2019.
Chris, go ahead.
But it'll definitely be interesting because, and John Harbaugh talked about this on Friday with his press conference, that everything they do is going to be built around the run, and it's just interesting in this day and age. that is really going against the grain. But you do have a quarterback who is absolutely unique in what he brings with that running game. The formula for me, can he get up into the middle of the pack as far as consistency as a passer, improving his accuracy, throwing more efficiently outside the numbers? I actually thought for a rookie, if you go back and look, he would go through his progressions and he would scramble and look to throw. I mean, it's not as though he didn't show positive signs, but you need to see that much more effectively if this is going to work. If it's going to look very similar and philosophically be very similar to what it was this year, I don't like their chances for that working out to a level that they're going to be happy with.
This isn't the Packers sweep of the 1960s where they could do that all the time. You can't be predictable in this game, and that's where the Ravens are going to have that challenge. They're going to have to figure out a way of being unpredictable on offense with a guy like Lamar Jackson that has the skills he has. You still have to make the teams guess on first down. What are you going to do? They're going to have to guess on second and short. What are you going to do? Because once you get into that predictability, kind of like what happened maybe with Flacco and some of the receivers, you kind of knew what the Ravens were going to do on first down. When it was first or second and long, the Ravens were going to do a certain thing. They were predictable with Joe, where they weren't predictable with Lamar, and they've got to be able to keep that sense of surprise against opposing defensive coordinators who now have games on tape about Lamar and what adjustments he has to make.
Well, we saw that with the Chargers.
Right, exactly. A second time through the lineup, basically, they saw what they needed to do.
I use that exact analogy. Yeah. I mean, it very much reminded me a third time through the order in baseball. We talk about that all the time. And I think the Ravens are still going to have an advantage. Even if they try to play this way again, the teams that have not experienced it, Lamar Jackson is such a unique athlete. He really is. And, we spend so much time talking about what he can't do or what he needs to do better, but that element of his game is so unique. And I think the Chargers, they got a taste of what it was like. If you go back to the second half of Week 16, we talked about that. They bottled up the running game in the second half of that game. The Ravens offense, after Tucker hit that long field goal after the touchdown to Andrews, they went 3 and out 3 straight times and didn't do anything.
Second time around, they prayed about it and just changed the personnel.
Right. But there definitely is a sense of he's one of those unique talents that there's nothing like it. You can try to replicate it as much as you can, but in the big picture, both for his well-being and if you really want to make this offense grow and to be dynamic and have balance, that doesn't mean 50-50. It just means, are you efficient in doing both? They're going to have to adjust. And so much of this, I will continue to say, so much of this, yes, it's about Lamar Jackson, but what do they do at wide receiver? What are they doing from a coaching standpoint? They've kept Greg Roman around. Marty Morningwig's gone. They wanted to keep Marty in some kind of pass game coordinator. That's why I asked John on Friday, are you looking to bring in someone to maybe fill that role that you had earmarked for Marty? Greg Roman in San Francisco? Yeah, Colin Kaepernick passed the ball. They also had Jim Harbaugh on that staff. And so are you doing everything you can from a coaching standpoint, from a personnel standpoint? Is Lamar Jackson doing everything he can to maximize this investment? And the jury's out, and it's going to be very interesting. And it's the same question that they're asking in Buffalo with Josh Allen and Josh Rosen in Arizona and Sam Darnold with the Jets, even though,
same question they're asking Matt Ryan here all these years later, and Matt Stafford, Detroit. How can we maximize what you are and who you are right now? I mean, Joe Flacco's going to go run a team somewhere. They're going to build it around him, whatever that is for him right now, right?
Yeah. I mean, it's every quarterback other than the guy that's over my shoulder there. There's some level of question. I guess the question with him is how much longer is he going to do this?
Right.
But I think
suddenly I feel some avocado ice cream. I think I'm hungry for
that.
But,
I mean, it's going to be fascinating because for the first time in a long time, quite frankly, you don't know what you're going to get. I mean, Jared Goff, the other guy who we're not going to talk nearly as much about this week, 2 years ago, he looked like he was a total disaster. I mean, he had some absolutely horrid rookie numbers, and he's in the Super Bowl
Jeff
2 years
Fisher's
later.
fault.
Right.
So,
and think about the two guys that aren't here. You look at a Drew Brees that just still flinging the ball around more than Brady ever thought about.
And who would have guessed that Drew Brees' first few years in the league, that he would still be playing all these years later?
And
the wrong team's here. I mean, this team didn't win.
And throwing for 4,500, 5,000 yards. And Patrick Mahomes, who's also a very special talent. and does some
sat
things.
on the bench last year.
Yeah, sat on the bench, and all of a sudden
you
now
never
he's
really know.
Yeah, it goes from bench to MVP.
Lamar Jackson, who knows? We could be talking about the Ravens in the Super Bowl a year from now. I mean, that would be fun, but there's a lot.
And on that note, we'll take a break.
A lot of work that needs to be done between now and then.
Chris Pika is here. Luke Jones is here. They'll be here all week. All of our WNST coverage brought to you by our friends at Strategic Factory, printing hats and shirts and swag and great stuff and cups. I'll have it all out this week. We're going to be here all week long. Lots of celebrities, Hall of Famers. Chris, I have a very special mystery guest.
You keep hyping. You were hyping this on the entire plane ride.
So I got a mystery guest coming for Luke in the middle of the week. And he said, I'm just going to look on the calendar and see who it is. And he looked on the calendar, and you know what it says? Mystery guest.
There you go.
So I have a mystery guest for Luke.
Is this the mystery team that's pursuing Manny Machado? You know, we always talk mystery team or
the San Diego Padres will not be here.
This is the home of Tony Schiavone. I mean, if you're in Atlanta, Tony's here.
I've wondered if it's pro wrestling.
Look, man, we talked about the Omni, we talked about wrestling, we talked about all that.
So Tony is the play-by-play guy of the AAA Gwinnett Stripers.
That's great,
here.
Isn't it?
And works Georgia football. I mean, he may even be around this week, and you never know.
That would be cool.
Yeah.
He's no jabroni.
No, good man.
The BuyAToyota.com audio vault is there 24 hours a day from anywhere in the world on your mobile device by downloading the TuneIn Radio app. We do come in crystal clear from anywhere in the world. The morning newspaper delivers digitally to your email inbox. It's all courtesy of our friends at Planet Fitness at PlanetFitness.com. Always $10 a month, $5 down to get in the best shape of your life, as well as the Maryland Jockey Club. They'll be racing down at Laurel Park. Make sure you check that out as well. And the big game is here in Atlanta. We'll be here all week long. If the Ravens deal Joe Flacco, we'll get that out first. And, of course, the Eric DeCosta press conference this week. Any breaking news, you'll get it first on the WNST Tech Service. It's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. We are WNST.net, AM 1570 at WNST Towson, Baltimore. And we never stop talking Baltimore sports.
I almost